And it
There we go.
is my pleasure to welcome Troy Astorino from the West Coast to Israel. I'm in just outside of Tel Aviv. It's a beautiful day today, just before it gets really hot and disgusting, and Middle Eastern summers. And Troy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. This is the Life Sciences Today podcast. We're a channel of Healthcare IT Today, which has an enormous following, and we've been just flooded with people. We've done 10 in the past 2 weeks, 10 shows, if you can believe it. Yeah, five.
Wow.
So we've done 5 shows in the past 2 weeks, and we have a backlog of like another 10 through the end of July. So it's really hot, and you're in great company. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the show. Um,
Yeah, thanks for having him. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, I'm excited to talk.
Okay, amazing. So, I ask a few standard questions, and it's just sort of just to get the conversation rolling. And I always start with a simple question to founder and leader of a company like Picnic Health, which is just tell me about your journey. At what point did you decide this is what you must do?
So my background, I spent a lot of time in healthcare because my parents are both doctors, and I was like in their offices, growing up and saw like firsthand, I think, problems that come from having like siloed records and siloed data in driving patient care and the importance of having really like patient-centered care. Um, but all of that was my background. The My training was in aerospace engineering and physics. I like stayed away from healthcare in getting started. Um, but my focus there was really in well, we'd say now AI, at the time would have said ML, and dealing with computational methods for learning. And so like coming out of that, saw that there was this you know big gap in how we're using data in healthcare, and that if we could do a better job of integrating different information sources, could have a really big impact on patient outcomes and patient care. And that it's not a novel like thought that's a problem and it could be better, but that so that really like machine learning AI techniques could make a really messy problem of like data being in like tons of different places and tons of different forms tractable. Um, and that's what really was like the impetus of starting Picnic Health. My I came at it from kind of that side. My co-founder came at it from the side of a patient being diagnosed with Crohn's disease and like seeing this common problem of data not being as helpful and records not being as helpful as they could be in care, and seeing ML as a tractable way to solve that problem.
Mhm. So, I mean, I'm just dying to understand this. I saw the website, and it says basically you say you collect data from any EMR, and you have visibility to everything. And so, how does that work?
Yeah, it sounds fake.
It's science fiction. That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way we operate is that we go through the patient. So when a patient signs up or like onboards onto our platform, they're authorizing us to collect their records on their behalf. Um, and when we first started the company, um, getting records meant like faxing out record requests and getting records like faxed and mailed back to us. If it was emailed, it was great. Our initial hypothesis was that like electronic connections and like portals were going to be good, but in practice, we found that like people didn't know their credentials, and like the data available through those mechanisms was not like good.
Yeah.
And so to actually solve like the real problem for patients was like, can we actually get all of the information for that person? We had to deal with the system as it was. Um, and so that was kind of like the foundation that we built. And today, now there are mechanisms through like various like EHR networks that like in providing like care for a patient, we can access much more data electronically. But even still, like through whatever mechanisms, the like more efficient sources, there's stuff that's missing. And so in a typical patient, like most of our patients, a lot of our patients are participating in studies or trials. Um, about half of like the key kind of like variables for research aren't sourced through electronic connections, but through like direct still outreach via eFax and getting stuff mailed, faxed, et cetera, back.
Yeah, paper forms. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When
Yeah.
people say eCRF, it's like, oh, it's space age. eCRF, electronic CRF, you know. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's still a lot of paper. You say 50%, that sounds about right. It might depend on the indication, but about 50% of the data in clinical trials seems to come from paper somehow, or direct interaction with the patient.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say it's of like EMR sourced variables, about 50% come from ones that we're going to like source through paper records.
Hmm.
Even if it's in an EMR, it's just that like the electronic transfer mechanisms, like because the ways EMRs are set up at like hospitals are not always like fully integrated, or like not all of the like modules have the pipes set up to like go in these other transfer mechanisms, and so the fallback case of a printout that is sent around is universally supported.
So it's a really gnarly problem, okay? And you guys set out to solve this really, really nasty and gnarly problem. So how did you do it? How long did it take you?
It took us a long time. It took us a long time. I'd say that really last year is like the time where it's like, okay, you know what? We have a pretty automated system for going for any individual to be able to like source their records from anywhere. And then it's not just sourcing it, but then it's also normalizing it and abstracting it
Yeah,
to
that's
like
right. Yeah.
common variables and like common representations to better understand that patient's like individual journey, deduplication, lots of stuff like that. But so it's been about 10 years. It was about 10 years from when we founded the company to when we got to like this problem is solved. And I think there were a few things on the way that were key for getting that kind of like core technology piece in uh, in place. Um, though from the beginning we were taking a like ML first, like an AI approach, like of trying to particularly like the structuring or like where we need to like how we need to outreach for records, like having predictions first. We did have like a big team of like clinical abstractors, like nurses, lab techs, pharmacy techs that were doing a lot of like data review and data labeling. And so we scaled that up in the Philippines, some in the US, some in the Philippines. And that operation had to actually be like pretty big. We at one point, I think, had 700 people on that team.
Whoa. Now I'm beginning to get it. Okay.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
lot of
do
labeling, man. It's a
a
lot.
lot, a lot of labeling. Yeah. Yeah, I think like it depends on how you count it, but we maybe have over 300 million annotations from clinicians on like longitudinal records that we've collected for patients. So that was like there was a lot of work that went into that, like both in terms of like collecting the records and like doing that labeling. Um, and for most of the company's history, we had been doing kind of more non-deep learning approaches to like building models that like use those labels to like kind of improve the efficiency of that labeling and the ability to abstract. But then in like 2023, with at the beginning of 2023, end of 2022, we started moving over to fine-tuning open weight models.
So now
Yeah.
You have how many? 300 million annotated.
I think we 300 million annotations. We kind of like built up over time. Um, and beginning of 2023 with seeing like a lot of like I don't remember what if that was I guess it was right after GPT-4. Anyways, saw that like we have been training many different models for different tasks, and instead of that, could apply that like big annotated data set to fine tuning open weight models and be able to just train one like large LLM to do all of these like clinical data um, extraction and structuring and interpretation tasks. Um, and so started doing that, and it's worked extremely well. Um, Now we have our model that is we're tuned on top of Llama 3 still, and it's like a relatively small model, an 8 billion parameter model, but with the depth of domain data and annotations, it like can outperform. It still outperforms the frontier models on the kind of like data labeling and interpretation tasks in records that we see across um, all of the different records and like types of data we need to abstract through our system.
So that gives you an amazing ability to actually connect. Right, you take a patient and it gives you the amazing ability to connect and correlate and to normalize and structure properly everything. Patient may have had 100 visits over the past, I don't know, 35 years and been across 50 different medical centers. And now you have this huge normalized data set for that patient. Did I say that right?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, yeah, and I think the record keeping laws only require like 7 years of retention, so we might not always get like 35-year history. We'll get at least a minimum of
Seven.
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 Um, but our typical patient we see, yeah, has over like care spread out across like 10 different health systems in that like 7-year period. Um, that's our median, and obviously some patients that have like care spread out over like many more facilities. And so I think if you don't take that approach of being able to get records from all of these places, you end up with big gaps in that patient journey.
But you still have a really good picture. And that actually, if I understand correctly, that brings me to my next question, which is, how you create value. So you seem to be creating a lot of really interesting value in the clinical trial space. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's like two arms to our business. One is this like direct to patient product around helping patients manage their care with the records that we like pull from them. But where we're really focused and growing now is in supporting non-interventional trials, non-interventional research, um, and doing that in an end-to-end way. I think in the traditional model, um, for all trials, traditionally, like research is site based, and there's like a lot of good reasons to be doing like clinical research through sites, but it also can be very costly and very time consuming and inefficient, especially for kind of like non-interventional trials that are primarily observational in nature, where you're trying to, maybe 70, 80% of the study's data model is information that is getting gathered in like standard of care for that patient and exists in those patients' medical records. So we can take a like very simplified, streamlined approach to these non-interventional trials than the traditional model, because we can center it around this direct patient interaction where we go directly to the patient and can be from the patient's perspective and the trial's perspective, like passively collecting EMR data and then abstracting and structuring it, EMR data across all the patient sites of care, um, and abstracting it into the study data model.
Well,
And
so give me an example, for our listeners. Most, our listeners are tech bio and biotech people, digital health people. So maybe some of them may not be familiar with the term non-interventional research. So give us a simple example of a non-interventional study.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I think one like very powerful like opportunity is in long-term follow-up studies. So and particularly in like cell and gene therapy.
Mhm.
So let's say a cell therapy has been approved, but the FDA has mandated that. Actually, this is true for like all cell and gene therapies that the FDA has mandated a 15-year follow-up for any patient that's received a one of these therapies, and that's these are incredible, like some oftentimes like curative therapies, but when it's a curative therapy, there's like we don't know like what the long-term like safety effects like could be. In general, like we have like a lot of confidence that they're safe, but I mean a ton of confidence that they're safe and they are these like great therapies, but want to be able to follow it over time. And so yeah, for every cell therapy, every gene therapy that's approved, the patients that are given that therapy need to be followed for 15 years, primarily to look for safety events. And so in a traditional model, this long-term follow-up would be done at the site where the patient received that therapy. And so in theory, the patient's like coming back for like site visits for 15 years to be like, hey, is everything okay? When in theory, this therapy is curative and there shouldn't be anything wrong. And sometimes like the sites that can do these there's not that many patients. Anyways, there aren't that many sites that can like deliver these therapies, and so oftentimes patients might to drive like many hours in, fly in to like one of these sites to um, participate in the trial, and it's not really realistic to expect them to keep on going for the next like 15
It,
years.
it, it doesn't
Doctors
scale.
move.
Non-scalable. It's non
Yeah.
it's a non-starter. We had something like that a few years ago uh, with a orthopedics device, which was since acquired by Stryker, and
Hmm.
in the UK, the NHS had some regulation that for this particular device, they needed to have like a long follow-up period after the operation. And so they actually signed up really fast because it was NHS. They had no problem signing up sites. But the problem, they signed up like 50 sites, like, relatively fast within less than a year. But the problem was traction with the patients because like, what you mean I have to come back to a site, get in a car and drive somewhere on the M4 to follow up on my rotator cuff? What's going on here? And what
Yeah.
happened was that after like it was supposed to be also like a 15-year follow-up, and the NHS was financing it, and Stryker was happy, we were happy, everybody was happy, except for one thing, the patients were not happy. And the patients like basically voted with their feet, and they said, yeah, okay, that's good, but we're not showing up. And then so like after like maybe 2 or 3 years, the sponsor called us up, the VP clinical calls us up, and she says, it's just not working. And our enrollment is going down. You could probably see that yourself from the system, right? From the numbers in your database. I said, yeah, I could see that. You guys are like, you started strong and you just died out fast. So yeah, I totally get it. And the ability to be able to look at the community health systems and get that follow-up data, that's an extremely powerful paradigm.
Yeah.
Great. So in the clinical space, a lot of value you're creating. So that brings me to my next question is you create a lot of value in clinical space. We'll focus on that. Um, but how do you capture it? What's the revenue model? How do you build people for that? Who gets billed for it? Who's your customer?
So I think we end up competing when we're selling directly to pharma and life sciences companies, and like oftentimes I think if they're looking at doing a traditional model, they'd go to like a traditional CRO to like run the study end to end. But if they're going to use a, a model like ours that can be more efficient, faster, they'd just go to us. So we end up taking the place of the CRO in running that trial. And I think it's not like an exact analogy because like we're also building the software that enabled like, for the patient interaction and for the system for like running the trial. There's some like direct to patient services. Like there's some clinical services that we can do in a decentralized manner as well. Like on top of the EMR data, like surveys, PROs, that's like pretty straightforward, but also, if we need to have like a mobile phlebotomist sent to like the patient's home or like send out like spit kits or like a prick test like blood testing
Yeah.
stuff like that, we facilitate that through our we have a telehealth organization. So the value capture is really because we can provide the same like need um, cheaper than like what a pharma company would pay going to a traditional, but doing a traditional study through a CRO. And it can be quite dramatic. I think like in one of the like long-term follow-up examples, the that we're working on with the customer, there's like 180 sites for 300 patients.
Hmm.
And the like cost and complexity of like keeping those sites running and coordinating things across the site is enormous.
Oh my God, that's huge. It's like, oh my God, I'm thinking 8 figures or something, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's not wrong. And so like the ability to, and like we were talking about earlier, just like doesn't work like for a long period of time. And so you can have an approach where you can be following the patients in a way that's like extremely low burden to the patients, like an app that they have on their phone, right? That's like, and it's like just passive, and they're getting this value of having their records out of it. And the cost that we can charge is like much lower than the cost that the trial would be otherwise, and we can do it a lot more efficiently even at that lower cost. So it's really a direct substitute for budget and spend that would be going to running trials in a traditional manner.
In the bad old way, the bad old-fashioned way, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So that's amazing. So is this what like a project pricing kind of model or a subscription? How does it work? Or it's just like CRO like for functional services. How does that work?
So there's a like platform. So typically when we're negotiating it and pricing it is on a study basis. There is a
Mhm.
like platform component that is like licensed for the ability to leverage our platform to like run the study, and then there's services items on top of that because we found that it's much more effective and it's important for us to be like an end-to-end like
Of course.
full services shop and be able to do everything that the customer, the sponsor needs.
Of course, that totally makes total sense. Um, I'm just wondering, okay, something, we'll take this offline because I have a question for you, which is sort of like kind of interesting for our viewers, but it's going to take us down a rat hole, and
Okay.
I'm going to postpone that. So if you have a few minutes to stay with me after we finish the recording, I'm going to ask you this question.
Yeah, I have time. I don't have anything till the top of the hour, so
Okay,
good.
great. Okay, so this brings us to the last question, which is kind of like an interview question. When you interview somewhere, they would say, "Where do you want to be in 5 years, Danny?" And so this is sort of like that, which is like, so what are the three things you want to achieve this year?
I think number one is like growing volume. The end-to-end like studies work that we've been doing has been growing really quickly, more than doubling each year, and so we want to
Oh,
keep that going. Like we work with over half of the top 20 pharma companies, and so it's like both like doing more studies within those companies and expanding the set of companies that we work with. um the other thing, let's see, that's one. Two, one of the really exciting things as so in terms of like company journey, I think we evolved from this like direct to patient like thing to like building out data sets that we would license to now doing these like end to end trials. And one of the really fun things and exciting things about doing end to end trials in a way that like reimagines how they can work is we can do it in a really in an AI first fashion. And in like so many parts of clinical like research life cycle and like, study design, startup, execution, etc. There are so many places where you can like leverage AI and LLMs to do things more efficiently in a way that would not have been possible like 2 years ago. And so, where we're building this kind of like integrated system that has all of these different components to do trials in a new way, it also gives us the opportunity to do that in like an AI first way, that helps add to that like ability to be radically more efficient. So I think that's really fun. And then the third would be the direct expanding our like AI assistant that is direct to patient too. I think like the fundamental value that we're providing in like a patient experience outside of like research participation is getting all your records in one place and being able to use that to better manage your care, and being able to layer AI like personal health assistant on top of that has been really powerful our for our patients, and I think there's just like a lot more that we can do there that I'm excited for us to keep on pushing on.
Oh yeah, I bet there's a huge amount you can do there. Tremendous amount you can do there. Troy Astorino, thank you so much for being our guest on the show. My name is Danny Lieberman. I'm the host of Life Sciences Today. We're a channel of healthcare IT today. It has a huge following, and we're picking up some speed ourselves. We've done 13 shows in 2 months. I've done 5 in the past 2 weeks. I have 10 in the 10 on 10 getting ready for liftoff. So we're picking up some momentum ourselves here, talking to really interesting and outstanding innovators like Troy. Look for us on all of your favorite podcast channels on Spotify, on Apple and Google, and YouTube, of course. And we'll be publishing this in a bit. Keep your eye out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. It's a lot of fun.